It is well stated, and I got to tell you, when you look back at the numbers I've talked about several weeks in a row now, before Medicaid was enacted in 65, healthcare costs were about 5% of the average income. So when you look at that and say, did we really help anybody? Because we've eliminated a lot of people's ability to have their own coverage by making it more than they can afford. And the answer over and over all of these 48 years to the problem that they've created is to increase the problem. And the electorate, I'm more frustrated with the electorate for not diving into this as deep as I think it's just it's an untenable problem.
Well, I think it's untenable, and of course the definition of untenable is we can't figure it out, essentially, and that's the answer. People aren't interested. People like to get free things. That's just human nature. And if you can spread out, broaden the number of people, the percentage of people that you're giving free things to, then all of a sudden you've broadened your political base. That's why we're hearing this to me, onerous term, public-private partnership. What we have is companies who are getting almost all of their revenue from the government. Now, on one hand, they are private companies, the kind of private companies that we say we'd like to encourage to grow. But when their only customers are government at different levels, certainly many of the construction companies here in Muskegon County, if they did not have county contracts, city and township contracts, state contracts, and the occasional federal contract, they'd be out of business. Well, do we really want a public company whose sole business is just encouraging more government spending? And unfortunately, we're getting more and more of this. And unfortunately, there is no answer that I can come up with short of voting out the Republicans when the time comes. And sadly, the result is that they will most likely be replaced for a Democrat for the following term. But if we keep allowing elected Republicans at every level, at the local level, the state level, the national level, to betray us, if we continue to be Charlie Brown and they continue to be Lucy, pretending to hold the football so that Charlie can kick that field goal, which he has yet to kick, we will continue to get the kind of governance that, frankly, we deserve.
You know, Jim, I'm not quite there yet. Let me tell you my rationale.
I'm not sure I am either.
Yeah, I'm really not.
But what do you do?
Here's my answer to what do you do. Because I have that debate that you just offered with a lot of people, and you're aware of the debates I've had. Some people are mutual friends of yours.
Well, you had one in the parking lot just coming in this morning.
I did. I think I had a discussion with Trayvon Martin. My arms are all skidded up. My back is skipped up. I think, actually, folks, I tripped over a crack in the pavement or whatever. But at any rate, you threw me off, Jim.
I'm sorry.
No, you're not. Here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking the way to steer the Republican Party is in the primary. And
yes.
one of the things that the establishment is, and by the way, when I use the word establishment, everybody, I'm talking about people that have volunteered for a long time, not some evil entity that's in a different sphere. The people that have volunteered for 8, 9, 10 years all of a sudden become establishment. As radical as I'm painted out to be, I'm colored establishment by some folks. I'm going, no kidding, I'm establishment now? Is it like the once you pass a decade of volunteerism, you're part of the old guard or something? That's obviously not me. But what I believe and what I've done with my own money, time, and name is I believe we need to advance against incumbents who are breaching their word. And I believe that so much that this coming election cycle, I'll be offering my services as a political consultant to those people who are willing to step up and do just that. I've had enough of Republicans telling me that there's something different than they are.
Well, we have, and I agree with you, we have here in Muskegon County one Republican who has announced that he will be entering the primary election for the state Senate seat, which is currently being held by State Senator Jeff Hansen. And Jeff has, I believe he's announced that he's running again. So he will have a challenger in that primary, and Nick Sundquist, who I think did a very brave thing. And I'm not yet going to come out as a supporter of Nick Sundquist or Senator Hansen. I'd like to see more of what they have to say. But when Nick Sundquist ran 2 years ago, he ran as a third-party candidate at a seat that most folks figured that Republican State Representative Holly Hughes would be able to retain. And Nick won just enough seats, or just enough votes, that he was able to gather enough that kept Holly Hughes from being reelected, and we now have Democrat Colleen Lamonti as the state representative. And I think that sadly, what's happened is too many Republicans said, "Oh my gosh, this is terrible. This terrible Nick Sundquist decided to run as a third-party candidate, and he cost the Republican Holly Hughes the election." I think the reality is that Republicans like Holly Hughes, perhaps Republicans like State Senator Hansen, are not communicating in any way, or certainly not in a way that we want to hear, to those people who believe, like you do and I do, that spending money that you don't have is imprudent. It didn't work for Detroit. It isn't going to work for the rest of Michigan, and it certainly isn't working for the United States of America. And our power lies in the primary.
I think you're right. The only exception, and by the way, I'm one of the people, and I've known Nick since 1998, I think, is when I first met Nick Sundquist. So I consider him a personal friend. I have a tremendous amount of respect for him. Having said that, I disagreed with his campaign dramatically. I did then, I did leading up to it, I still do, as it relates to Holly Hughes. And my rationale is this. First off, Holly Hughes didn't deceive her constituency by painting herself as something she's not. Along with that, Holly Hughes is in a moderate district. The people that she was elected to represent don't agree with you and I probably on most of the issues. So it isn't surprising that their representative wouldn't necessarily agree with us on a lot of the issues. And I think what Nick Sundquist's challenge of her did in that race is it caused us to say, we can only get half of what we want, so we don't want anything. I think that's a foolhardy approach to politics.
Well, that may be, and I'm not arguing that he was right or wrong in this. I'm arguing that he was brave to do it. And I'm also arguing that it's unfortunate that Holly and too many Republicans, just like Mitt Romney, who saw 10 or 8 to 10 million fewer voters than John McCain had, because he had so turned off the conservative wing of the Republican Party. I think it's a mistake for any Republican to say that I'm going to take the conservative votes for granted. They'll come out because they dare not let a Democrat win. I don't think certainly anybody here in Muskegon County is all that horribly upset with Colleen Lamotte. I mean, we disagree with her votes. There have only been a few votes I would expect that have been significantly different from the way many Republicans have voted in the past. And I think it's important to understand that when we accept the worst of a bad mix, we continue to bring down the kind of quality politicians that we're given to choose from. Classic example being the city of New York for mayor. You've got a very, very huge left-wing a gay female activist, and that's pretty much her claim to fame. That's what she has done in her life. That's what she's accomplished in her life. And this crazy internet wiener pervert. What a choice. What a lovely choice.
I think it's what I've said all along, that folks that are elected often are really, really great representation of the people that have elected them. So we'll know what face New York wants to wear when that election's over with, and it's entirely up to them. Truly, I think that. But it's just like when I said I will help those who campaign against incumbents that have just went against what they campaigned on. I think even while I say that, I have to caution folks that we have to be a little bit smart with that, because just to do some kind of ideology math or this litmus test doesn't seem to take in the fact that in Lansing or in Washington, we also have to concern ourselves with party politics caucuses. And so if we want to cost ourselves a majority and permanently set everybody across the state or indeed across America in the back seat by being ideological thickheads, I think we need to be careful with that type of thing. So at any rate, what we need to do, Jim, is we're going to go to a break, and we'll be right back, and I've got a couple different messages for you. Well, welcome back. You're listening to the Renegade River Show, and my name is Mike Hewitt, in the studio today with Jim Riley.
That's true.
I'm having a lot of fun today. What about you, Jim?
I am, too. Once you pulled yourself out of that puddle in the parking lot, you really got your act together, buddy.
Man, my elbow hurt, but it sure woke me up.
Yes, well, I know. It's fun. I know I always enjoyed a little adrenaline rush when I was doing my morning show on Sundays. So.
Yeah, there's got to be a better way than to fall down in a mud puddle.
Well, you're looking good.
Yeah,
you bounced right back up just like a true a trooper.
That's because you could just see the front of me. If you saw the back of me, you'd be, well, you're already laughing. So
We
never
try
mind
to
that.
avoid the back of you.
Yeah. Hey, let's switch gears a little bit. Have you been watching the latest debate or drama going on over the House, GOP House, U.S. House, talking about immigration reform?
Well, it's lots of stuff to talk about. What are you specifically referring to? Because it's a big, comprehensive conversation.
It really is. I see that Paul Ryan made some comments, but you also picked up on Steve King, is it?
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Steve King is a United States congressman from Iowa, and he made some comments that were viewed as a despicable, hurtful, racist, of course, which I'm not sure there's a more powerful word today, and I mean this without jest. Calling somebody a racist is about the worst thing you can call someone, certainly worse than any of the things that what's-his-face Wiener in New York is being called. And they're calling Representative King a racist because what he said was essentially, the quote, for everyone who's a valedictorian, and he was talking about illegal, primarily Mexicans, but illegals who came across to the United States from over the Mexican border. He says, for everyone who's a valedictorian, there's another 100 out there that weigh 130 pounds. They've got calves the size of cantaloupes because they're hauling 75 pounds of marijuana across the desert. And he'd said some other things incendiary, viewed as incendiary by others. But he also went on this to say 80 to 90% of illegal drugs come in from or through Mexico. Now, both of those comments were viewed as, again, racist and evil and horrible and everything else. Well, interestingly, for Representative King, who's a Republican, he went on the ABC News show this morning, as a matter of fact, and he defended himself, and he said he's been told, and I think it's probably true here, said that the DEA has told him that every distribution chain of illegal drugs in the United States has at least one link in that chain that is an illegal immigrant. And he went on to defend what he had said. And I think it's important to understand, we have people who will make money from comprehensive immigration reform. We have people who, for whatever reason, support opening our borders, having absolutely no checking, making crossing the border from Mexico into the United States similar to going from Michigan to Ohio. We have, and interestingly, we know that if you are caught illegal, and clearly if you are caught illegal working in Mexico, you're going to go to a Mexican prison for a very long time. Our laws that are being deemed as hurtful and harmful and unique are actually probably the easiest immigration, the easiest on the people who get here of any immigration laws in the country, in the world, as they now stand. But Representative King stood by what he said. And again, when we see the people who support comprehensive immigration reform, which, by the way, is some type of immigration reform wrapped in another 5,000 pages of goodies, just like we've seen with Obamacare, that they always show the one illegal who's been here, who is the valedictorian of his or her particular class. They are not the average. We are not looking. As a matter of fact, the United States doesn't even have a policy, even though they have laws that the President of the United States has chosen on his own not to enforce. But we don't have a policy of excluding these people. By taking and by using the one valedictorian, or however many valedictorians there may be, and I can assure you there aren't that many, as the example of everyone, using the exception as proof that everyone is the same. And when you get somebody like Representative King who says, hold on here, for every one of these valedictorians, I can show you 100 drug mules that are crossing this country with huge thighs and calves because they are carrying 75-pound packs of various drugs. We know it. We see it. The DEA has proven it. That is now a racist comment, much like anything that certain groups don't like. They'll call it racist.
You know what I like to do, Jim? I like to get beyond the rhetoric sometimes and look at the math. Now, for years and years, during the Bush administration specifically, and before that, we heard numbers in the 16 to 18 million range for the number of illegal immigrants that have crossed our southern border. And then when Obama became president, that math dropped from a low of 16 million to 11 million. And I think, wait a minute, did a whole bunch of folks go back, or did we find a new way of counting the folks that are coming across? And it causes me to pause and say, well, how do we know how many people have come across. And, you know, when I look at even their lowest number now of 11 million, keeping in mind I used to laugh at 16 to 18 million because the numbers are just absolutely baloney. There's way more than that. But even if they're 11 million, you have the equivalent of the entire state of Michigan plus half of the state of Indiana in terms of population that they're saying snuck across the border. That represents about 4,000 people a month for 27 years, month after month, nonstop, 4,000 people a month. You ever watched them try to empty a stadium after a football game? And I'm thinking 4,000 people snuck across the border every single month without the Mexican government's assistance and, frankly, without the U.S. government's assistance. And I think, no, this has got to be the result of a concerted effort. And then I pause again and I look at the fact that when Ronald Reagan came up with his big amnesty waving of the wand, was at 3 or 4 million at that point in time. And so now we're dealing with anybody's math that's 3 to 4 times more than what Ronald Reagan waved at. And the numbers that had led up to his time were a huge period of time before that, went all the way back to Eisenhower before we had to have a sweeping consideration of the southern border. And I think what's going to be the result of this newest wave of the wand? And the answer is obvious can be. History always demonstrates itself as what should have been our measure for the future. So if we're at 11 to 16 million, depending on who's telling the story, 15 or 20 years from now, that number will be triple. We know that. It's a math fact. And it causes me to say, what's the real agenda? I know votes are the obvious thing. Certainly money is the obvious thing. But I think if you talk to the extreme left, the folks that you touched on for a moment that don't want borders, those are the people that caused me to write America's Final Beginning, because they don't want borders. Literally, they want a global government. And the only way to do that is to get rid of the darn borders, equalize nations' economies, and get everyone speaking one common language. And the only way to achieve that is they're going to divide us up and erase the borders. And that's kind of the path we're on right now. They're dividing us up by religion, by eye color, by race, by any possible way they can find to divide us up, they are, while they're erasing our borders.
The question I have, and I agree with you 100%, but the question I have is why are Republicans buying and drinking and slurping away at this Kool-Aid? The one thing that has always escaped me is when I hear Republicans talking about comprehensive immigration reform is why there has to be any type of path to citizenship at all for people who have violated our federal and state laws for either a week or for decades. Maybe we can certainly change laws. It can be argued that we don't want to throw them all in trucks and move them across the border and things of that sort. That may be worthy of discussion. But why should we reward anyone who violates our laws with guaranteed, and if you've read the path to immigration that Paul Ryan has championed, it is so filled with loopholes that these people can become Americans almost overnight. And again, separate immigration from citizenship, then you have a different issue. And I think I'm going to tell you where a lot of those multi-millions of people who at one point under the Bush administration were said to be illegal and now have disappeared. Some have gone back across the border because of the poor economy. But what's happened in many states, 2 states I can tell you that I'm fully aware of, Wisconsin and California, you do not have to have any type of proof of citizenship whatsoever in order to get a driver's license in either of those 2 states. But a driver's license is the only proof that is necessary to get citizenship. So if you walk into California with a valid California license plate, or a driver's license, and you present that driver's license, you can vote. You can vote at that. And once you get your ability to vote using your driver's license, that's all that's necessary to vote in California and in Wisconsin. Once you've been able to vote, then you can translate those around to getting citizenship. And it's too easy already.
So then we've got, by comparison, there was a political dissident in Venezuela. So you got to think about that for a minute. This guy was not favored by the Venezuelan government. So all of a sudden he becomes my hero to start with. But that part aside, he spends 18 years trying to get access to and then citizen of the United States. And I think, no, wait a minute now. This fella spends a large...
legal way, the path that we already have.
This guy does everything he can possibly do to be a conscientious citizen of the United States. He wants to follow our laws to the letter of it. It takes him 18 years before he can begin thinking about bringing his family behind him. And you just shake your head and say, wow. One thing I agree with Paul Ryan on is that the system truly is broken. But the idea that the way to fix it is to reward 11 to 16 million people with citizenship because they didn't respect us is flabbergasting. Let me offer you a couple quotes. There's so many I can't even begin to write. Karen writes on Facebook. She's quoting, Latinos are coming, the Latinos are coming. She's quoting a guy who's a California state senator, Jose Baca. And then he's the person that offered the quote, the Latinos are coming, the Latinos are coming. He's mocking the American revolutionary Paul Revere. Richard Alatorre, Los Angeles City Council. They're afraid we're going to take over the government institutions and other institutions. They're right. We will take them over. We are here to stay.
Take over is an interesting
It's a really
comment.
We're talking about annexation.
One thing about saying we're arriving.
No.
They're going to take over.
Gloria Molina, Los Angeles County Supervisor, we are politicizing every one of these new citizens that are becoming citizens of the country. I got to tell you that a lot of people are saying, I'm going to get out of there and vote because I want to pay them back. She says, pay them back. That's a key thing here. It goes on and on. People should make no mistake about, and I can't say the word, it's a person's name is to Mexico, not California, United States of America. What the person's quote is suggesting is that California doesn't belong to the United States of America, that it's a Mexican state. And if you look at the popular, it's kind of hard to argue with the person. But I get an entire page of people that are all in elected positions. Every person on this page with these, what I consider very incendiary comments.
Anti-American comments.
National newspaper of Mexico, the American Southwest seems to be slowly returning to the jurisdiction of Mexico without firing a single shot. That's, you go, it is, they're right. They're annexing it. If you go to Las Vegas and you ask yourself, what's the most popular cable station on cable TV? It's Hispanic. What's the most popular radio station? It's Hispanic. It's the same in LA. It's the same in many parts of Arizona. And listen, I'm not making a racist statement. I'm making a statement that says if we don't have a border, Jefferson, if a country without a border is not a country at all. We need to wake up and ask ourselves what kind of future we want, if we want one.
Well, okay, I think those of us certainly listening and certainly here in the studio are in agreement. We don't want a country with no borders. But does it make sense for us, because we are so fearful of the Democrats being even more anti-American, that we would still vote for Paul Ryan's and the rest of the Republicans who may very well stand tall with the Democrats, with the borderless state politicians? And should we reelect these people, or should we say, no, enough? It seems to me that we get, as you said, certainly the city of Detroit or the city of New York may very well be earning the kind of mayoral candidates that they've got. If we Americans who we're not anti-Mexican, we are not anti-immigrant, but we most certainly are anti-giving people who violate our laws citizenship, if our elected Republicans are going to enact, and of course Ryan and many others are the leaders on this charge, if they're going to enact policies that are anathema to the rest of conservative America, seems to me they deserve to find a new career. Yes, we'll have to suffer through some Democrat rule, but we do not need Republicans who are going to promise one thing and then cover up. And to me, Paul Ryan is just despicable. He tore himself apart on the Rush Limbaugh show trying to explain his comprehensive immigration bill as Rush Limbaugh was reading the bill to him, and it was clear that Ryan hadn't even read most of it and could not defend it.
Jim, I'm still not there. I'm not ready to accept a Democrat over a Republican because I'm still not willing to give them.
What happens if they pass this next month or in October?
I'm saying what I've always said. We need to challenge them in the primary. We need to have our voices heard at the state conventions and in the county conventions.
Yes, we got to hear them. We got to let them know that we're angry enough that we might be willing to suffer through a Democrat replacement of a rhino Republican. And by the way, don't give away your enchiladas.
No, I
because they taste very
nothing
good.
worse than doing that. When we come back from our break, Jim, we're going to talk about what Marcy wrote on our Facebook page. We'll be right back, folks. Welcome back. You're listening to the Renegade River Show, and my name is Mike Hewitt, and we're in today with Jim Riley.
Yes, my name, Jose Jimenez. Remember, we did have Jose Jimenez.
Marcy writes on the Facebook page. She writes, I just got back from Tucson, had dinner with locals. We have no clue. What should I asked her, what did you learn? She writes that we should all learn Spanish and several dialects because they're not all just coming from Mexico, and that illegals in Pima County get deported and come back within 3 weeks. And most have no desire for citizenship whatsoever. They're just here for dollars.
Of course, and it makes sense for them. I don't blame one single illegal of any ilk for coming to this country. I blame this country for rewarding them for violating our laws. And I certainly blame Republicans and Democrats alike for not enforcing the laws that that our elected representatives have chosen to vote on, take credit for, and now just in our face flaunt the fact that they're not going to enforce the very laws that we, the people, have said, hey, come on, this ought to be, we passed the law. Shouldn't we be enforcing this, folks?
So
it's
a fascinating thing because on one hand, I think that 15 to 18 years for a person to go through a legal immigration process, to me, that's insane. That's right up there with what we're going to find that we need to do.
The current system.
The current
Correct.
system is wrong.
It's wrong.
I absolutely do not endorse it. And to me, folks, you folks that think Obamacare is going to be wonderful because the government's going to take care of us, I want you to think about 15 to 18 years to get a legal immigrant into the United States because it's that bureaucratic mentality that will be controlling your life when you've got a flu or something really serious.
Same mentality.
So that's a little bit of a fearsome thing. But then I look and say, okay, we really don't know how many people have illegally immigrated to the United States, and we really don't know where they're actually from. We say Mexico, but I think we paint with a wide brush because they're from all over South America and, frankly, from all over the Middle East and probably other places that I don't have no clue about. That's what our southern border actually represents, and the numbers are staggering when you start talking about the equivalence of 2 or 3 combined states in just illegal immigration. But then I pause and say, well, how many of them don't even want citizenship? Why are we standing on our head to try to get them free benefits and citizenship if a good portion of them have no interest in that, much less, here's that evil word, much less assimilation, because assimilation is what made America great in the first place. We were able to take the best from a whole bunch of people from around the world and create an American culture, and that's not something that a lot of these folks want to do.
Well, it is harmful at every level, and I'll give you a classic example. Just travel up to Quebec in Canada. Almost everyone that I've ever met in Canada, it doesn't matter if they're in British Columbia or Ontario or Quebec, they are lovely, lovely people. But the antipathy that English-speaking Canadians have towards the province of Quebec is frightening. They are visibly angry, emotionally distrustful, and unhappy with Quebec as a province, with the French speakers as a group. When you speak to people in Quebec, and Honey Bunch's family is all from north of Montreal, they all speak French up throughout the province, but certainly up in the Montreal area. I have had perfectly reasonable, calm adults come to me and say, you know, if I had my choice, we'd kill all of the English speakers in the country. They do not like each other. They are essentially two separate countries, not working together, not interested whatsoever in assimilation at all. As a matter of fact, Quebec, some decades ago, took the step of making it illegal to even put a sign in English in a front, publicly anywhere. So, matter of fact, to the point where there was a poster that had a hello in like 40 different languages, and the speech police came out and arrested or gave a citation to the poster store and forced them to take the poster away because you were not allowed to have an English-speaking word and a sign or anything of that level. So we will have that here in America. Clearly, we're going to have that in America, where we're going to have huge swaths of America that do not speak English. We will have elected representatives who may or may not speak English, but we will have huge areas in the Southwest, certainly in perhaps in the Southeast. We are already having an area here in the Dearborn area in the state of Michigan that is decidedly not American, has not embraced the American culture, but in fact is embracing the Islamic Arabic culture of the Mideast.
It's fascinating when you think about it, that they escaped harm's way by leaving there and come here to create the culture that they escaped harm's way from. But
it is stunning.
It is stunning to me. But when you mention Canada, two thoughts come to mind. Both of them kind of anecdotal. But one is years ago, back in the early '90s, I was doing consulting for a company called George S. May, and they sent me up to a company that was 4 hours north of the U.S.-Canadian border to some little town. It was a restaurant. My function was to go up there and do a financial analysis and try to figure out why the restaurant was in trouble. Well, my first reason was you're in the middle of nowhere. But when I got to town the first evening, it was after everything had closed except for a little local bar. So I went into the bar, sat at the bar, ordered a wonderful hamburger and a big, tall, icy cold beer. It was a great meal. And I got kind of half talking to the fellow sitting beside me, but while we were having a conversation, this big bar fight broke out kind of behind us, off in a different section, but right there. And I was stunned. No one's reacting. Everyone's sitting at the bar drinking their drink and eating their burgers or talking whatever they're doing. I said to the guy, I said, "What's all that about?" He says, "It's a race riot." I'm looking, I said, "I don't understand what you're saying to me." "Oh, yeah, you got French Canadians and Canadians. They fight all the time." I said, "You call that a race riot?" Huh? No kidding.
That's a race riot.
That's what he identified. He says a race riot. Very calmly. He sipped on his beer some more. And then the other thing I wanted to talk about real briefly, because you were talking about how wonderful the folks were in Quebec. My family went to Montreal in 1976 for the Olympics, and those people up there were so icy, cold, and rude that after all these years, it still stands out as one of my memories of Canada. And I can't paint with a wide brush because a lot of the Canadians I've met have been wonderful, but not so much in Montreal. As soon as you opened your mouth and had speaking English with an American accent, they were done being polite to you, even at McDonald's.
You know what? I'm glad you brought that up because neither Honey Bunch nor I are fond of Montreal, and in fact, there is an antipathy towards those people who speak English. Honey Bunch does speak French, so she was able to kind of calm it down a little bit. But yeah, Montreal is much like Paris in that it's not a very friendly city. But again, I think it's unfriendly more because of the fact that that culture has been brought up to believe that English speakers are somehow to be suspicious of, or certainly not to be trusted. And again, we have a wonderful culture here in the United States. If you're interested in being Dutch or Swedish or African or whatever it is that you want to celebrate, that's fine, but you're an American. Unfortunately, that's going by the wayside. We will suffer. Countries who have embraced the cultural individuality, like Canada, Belgium is another one, have found nothing but trouble. And, of course, the worst result is what we see in places like the Middle East, where there is an absolute hatred of those who are forced to live side by side and who, in fact, go after each other physically. And will it happen here? I think it probably will.
Jim, it's already happening here.
Yeah.
Art Torres, January 14th, 1995. At the time, he was the California Democratic Party chairperson. At the Latino Summit response to Proposition 187, power is not given to you, you have to take it. People say to me when I was on the Senate floor, when I was in the Senate, "Why do you fight so hard for affirmative action programs?" And I tell my white colleagues, because you're going to need them.
And he said that with a smile, I'm sure, and with a bit of revenge in his heart because of his feelings that they have been unfairly discriminated against, and revenge is coming, white guy.
And then he asks, remember, 187 is the last gasp of white America. And listen, from my standpoint...
What is 187?
That was a proposition at the time that went on with affirmative action.
Gotcha.
It was a big brouhaha in 1995 with the Clinton administration and all that. Hey, before we run out of time today, I wanted to share a bit of news with you, if I could, that maybe I don't know how many people will think is newsworthy. I'm personally excited about it, but listeners know that from time to time I refer to my sister Brenda Brown out in Nevada with her political quips that she's made over the years, and currently especially going on of late with the Pontiac Police Department and how those folks out there, as of September 1st, the retired police officers, firemen, and public works that gave their 28, 30, 35 years working for the city of Pontiac are getting screwed out of their pension, out of their health insurance, I'm sorry. And the irony to that is that they had accepted lower wages so that they could end up with greater health insurance, et cetera, in their retirement years. So while Governor Snyder's trying to get 470,000 people free insurance, he's sending his executive managers are the ones that are reneging on those contractual agreements. But where I'm going with this is that next Sunday, Brenda Brown, my sister from Nevada, will be physically here in the studio. And I bet you we can get her to offer a little bit of insight onto that. I'm really looking forward to it.
Someone who's on the front lines.
In the front lines. Interestingly, everyone knows I'm not a union guy. My brother-in-law, her husband, was the president of the police officers union for a couple terms and served in various offices throughout his career over there. He was the person that negotiated for lower wages than the community peers around him, specifically to be able to take care of the folks when they were in their senior years. And so that is front line. And again, I'm not in favor of trying to get citizens to cough up money for union contracts, but by golly, we ought to be able to keep our word on one issue before we give 470,000 people something for free. Thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you next Sunday.